Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talent Optimization, Creating Your Dream Teams. I'm thrilled to have the conversation today to really dig into hiring and how we hire individuals inside of our organization. And I think I got the best in the business with me today with Ryan Festerling. And Ryan is the president at QPS Employment Group. And QPS is a full-service staffing and employment agency with 55 locations throughout the Midwest. So you're definitely going to hear some fun stories. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So one of the things that I, really looked into when I was looking at QPS, and I'll be honest, it's one of the reasons why I love working with QPS. And that is one of your recruiters, Becca, had put out on LinkedIn that she had overheard somebody that she had just hired come into the office and say, hey, I just got this temp job and I'm just not really sure. And Becca comes out and says, you didn't get a temp job. You just got the opportunity into your career.
Yeah, you know what? I think when you look at just the full spectrum of talent acquisition, if that's what you want to call it, if you don't have the attitude that Becca has, and she's one of our many QPSers, so to speak, that have that attitude, we're not placing people. We really feel like we're giving people the opportunity to really change their lives. Yes, some of these jobs and a lot of them are temp jobs, but boy, if we don't have that attitude that we are giving people an opportunity to really change their life and maybe have a permanent job, maybe have a new career, and maybe it is a temp assignment, but again, we have to have that positive attitude that we're doing something special.
Yeah. And when you look specifically at whether it's hiring staff within your organization or your QPSers out there really working to fulfill those dreams for not only the companies that they're sourcing for, but also the individuals coming in, what are the things that are most important in optimizing that talent?
Yeah. Well, I think the starting point is, when you're in our business, not only do I have to hire for my internal staff of about, 350 folks, but we have 1,800 customers. And those 1,800 customers all have a unique culture. I also like to believe, though, that we do business with some of the best customers in the country. And those customers have a very high bar. And so the match is perfect. We only do business with companies that are going to align with what we do. So I think the first part is just making sure that we are looking for what we are understanding that you need. And so for us internally, culture is always going to be the most important. But, it's hard for us to understand 1,800 different cultures. But we really do ask all the way from the starting, question when we are talking to prospective customers of why do employees love working for your company? That's our number one thing is why do people want to work for you? Because we want to place people where they can have a great experience. So I think there's a lot of similarities in the buckets of things that we're looking for. So, culture, clearly the proficiencies of the job. But, we've got a hard job in that we are looking to find the right person and then place them at the right customer. And, every office may have between 30 to 40 customers. Some have over 100. So on one hand, it's a great opportunity. On the other hand, it's how do you find the right person to go to the right place for the right period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. And as executives and HR professionals are really listening to this podcast and kind of digging into, all right, what are the key takeaways I can take away from me and my organization? I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about culture. So you talked about culture, but how do you really determine what culture is inside of an organization to determine, hey, are we making a cultural fit between the individual and the organization?
Yeah. I actually think that culture can be a very overused word or incredibly generic. And anyone that knows me knows that I like to kind of distort something in order to figure out really what it means. And so for me, I am going to use the word culture, but I'm going to probably get a little bit more detailed and to say, don't just look at what you say are your values or your beliefs. Actually measure and talk to the best people in your organization and see if that actually matches what you're saying. Take a look at the people that you don't think should work there and see if that actually matches what you're saying. Because I've run into a lot of HR leaders and folks that what they say they're looking for and then what they actually place value on. And for me, when I say place value, it's what you hire to, it's what you promote to. And quite honestly, it's what you ask people to work for another organization, meaning we don't think you're the right fit. That is what is defined as your culture. Whether you like that or whether it's by design or by default, that's your culture. And so, I really try to look at the decisions that you make and then say, does that really the culture that you say you want? If not, you've got a big disconnect. And I think that employees and candidates through the candidate life cycle today, they're smarter than ever. They can be pickier than ever. And so I really think that we need to hold ourselves to a really high standard of what we mean when we say culture. Because when you're saying one thing and they show up and they see another, the reputation is really important. And having a consistency is really important in that. So again, I would ask people to really define their culture, not just by what they think it is, but look at all the decisions that they make on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis and see if that actually supports what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So can I boil this down? No bait and switching, right? Like, we don't want to bait and switch. We're this amazing company, and you walk in, you're like, what is this? It may be amazing to someone, but we really want to make sure that they understand what that is.
Yeah. And again, people are smart, and between social media and the Glassdoors of the world and Google reviews, I always tell people to just be candid about what it is. If the work environment is long hours, say it. It's long hours. This is what we do. But to say that we're really flexible, but flexibility means after you leave the work, that's not flexibility. So I'm not saying necessarily embrace who you are and those things that are challenging, but be transparent about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to shift a little bit as we've talked a lot about culture. We hire the whole person when we, bring somebody into our organization. And, we at Elevated Talent tend to look at this in three kind of realms, which is head, heart, and briefcase. Heart being that culture piece that we've talked quite a bit about, but the head being, hey, what are those behavioral traits that you have? And what is that cognitive ability that you have? So meaning, hey, there's times where we need to hire somebody and they need to get up to speed within 30 days. We don't have a year and a half for that, right? And there's jobs. So for example, if you said, hey, Tracy, you need to go sit in front of a computer and enter payroll in for 40 hours a week, I'm going to be like, no, I'm done, right? Like, that's not a skill set that I have. But yet so often I feel like we miss that when we're hiring individuals is what are the behavioral traits that the job really needs and what are the behavioral traits that a person has. So that's our head. Our heart is culture. Then our briefcase is education, experience, all the things, right? So what have you found in, not only at QPS, but at Kohl's as heading their HR team? What have you found to be kind of that success matrix, that success formula for hiring the whole person?
Yeah, I like how you categorize those things. And I think they're pretty intuitive. Breaking them down into what the actual reality is probably hard. I think when people are hiring, especially for a salaried position, maybe an executive level position, maybe I'll talk about that for a minute. They're usually viewing this as, I want the whole package. And so I want, if it's a 10-point scale, I want a 10 in this category, I want a 10 in that category, a 10 in that category. And on the talent acquisition side, we're like, great, that candidate probably doesn't exist. So what are the things that you can give on a little? And, one of the questions that we always ask the team is, or the hiring manager is, so you're saying these are the must-haves in every category. Do you have anyone on your team that's a level 10 that you actually want? And they kind of look at you, and the answer in most cases is no. Mm-hmm. And so I think how I think about that, and it also relates to, hourly employees, whether that's manufacturing or in the office, is when you are looking for those three categories, as you put them, what are the must-haves? What are the nice-to-haves? And what are the things that are really going to change the trajectory of your business? And so, if the briefcase part is really high, but the culture is maybe halfway where you want it, I would argue that person probably won't be able to get the things done out of the briefcase, so to speak, because their heart is not necessarily matched to where the heart of the organization is. And so, the whole culture Trump strategy is definitely out there. But I guess just being candid about, if those are the three categories, and I think those are good ones, what are the things that are must-haves, what are nice-to-haves, and what are those aspirational things that you can kind of grow into? Because I'm just not so sure that everyone's going to be perfect in every single one of those categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was listening to your Biz Times Economic Trends interview, and one of the things that you stated is we have to listen to our employees more than we ever have before. How are we creating loyalty with our staff and redefining that flexibility? And I'm really curious about, how do you really take a look at that from both a recruitment and a retention standpoint?
I've had a lot of people follow up with me on that since the Biz Times presentation. And, flexibility means so many different things to so many different people. If you were to just talk to myself versus, some of my coworkers, we would probably define it a little differently. And, I guess you've heard of the golden rule, obviously, and Tracy, maybe you've heard of the platinum rule, but the platinum rule obviously is treat me as I want to be treated. And so I think from both a recruitment standpoint as well as a management standpoint, it's really asking that basic question of, what does flexibility mean to you?
Right.
And, there again, going back to your bait and switch, if you are an organization that you truly believe with all your heart that you cannot be flexible because there's, you could be running an operation and you need the plant manager there from 8 to 5, or if you're a law firm and you need support as a paralegal, whatever those things are, I think you should really debate what you mean by flexible, and then make sure that you're asking that same question to the candidate of, what does flexibility mean to you? I worked with a company a couple of weeks ago that defined flexibility, and they said, we are a very flexible organization. I probably would not have defined them as very flexible, but where they were right is for their industry, they're actually very flexible. And so what we did is we actually then kind of bifurcated that to go, all right, well, if you're an HR person, you don't need to be in your industry to be a good HR person. If you're a finance person, you actually don't need to be in your industry. And so they had to actually go, well, what are the things that we can be flexible on at the core of our business? And what are the things that we might need to be more flexible on because we want to compete with people outside of our industry? So I guess the short answer to your question is making sure that you define what you think flexibility is, and being very transparent in the recruiting process of, what are your expectations of flexibility? Because I think those things mean very different things to different people, and also different stages of their life.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, because in my ear, I have both my HR folks saying, okay, I get that. And I get how we can wrap that into our job description, right? We're thinking block and tackle. But then I've got the executives in my other ears saying, all right, Tracy, and Ryan, how is this going to impact our bottom line? And why do I care? So yeah. I'm curious, because you've played both roles very, very well. So I'm really curious your take on that.
Yeah, no, and I actually am playing both sides of that. HR reports to me today, but it's a very small part of my job. And I have found myself going, oh, come on, HR, like we can figure this out, or we don't need to do that. So I totally get it. But I do think, when you throw all of the things into the blender, so let's just say it's the HR side, what you said, and then there's the executive side of how's this going to impact our bottom line. I would be the first person to admit that I've changed my point of view over the past probably 3 or 4 years in a pretty significant way. And I continue to evolve in that thinking. I actually love that I do. I think that flexibility actually can increase your bottom line if you do it right. I really think so. The whole notion of, we could talk for 2 more hours on what does work-life balance mean, and there really isn't. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There's work and life that coexist together. And so I would actually argue that you need to take some risks and push the envelope a little bit, and be okay with, you might be wrong. You might have looked at it a little differently a year ago than today, with technology improvements and people having a willingness. So I think people willing to try new things are going to learn some new things. People that aren't trying new things, they're going to keep doing the same. So I'd rather be on the spectrum of learning and adjusting and correcting and continuing to try to get it right.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. So as we kind of start to wrap this up a little bit, one of the things that we really like to do is say, hey, what is one key takeaway for the exec team that's listening to this conversation, saying, what can I implement inside my organization? And I know we just talked about flexibility, but I'm just curious from an overall hiring standpoint.
I'm probably going to go back to one of the things I said with a little bit of a nuance is, we all have in our heads what we think from a talent acquisition standpoint, whether it's hourly folks, white collar, blue collar, all the way to professional. What we have in our heads, what we think we want, might not exactly be what is super successful today. And what I mean by that is, I'm a big fan of the strengths-based kind of orientation, so to speak. And I like to study things that work.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever role you're looking for, if you could say, I could create another one of these people, or, this new vice president or this salesperson or this, production supervisor, and then write that person's name down or whoever they are. And then without collaboration, have people write down the 5 traits that this person exhibits, and ask a couple of people, get them to align, kind of flip your cards over, and then actually put that up against the mirror and say, is this what we are saying is our best? Or did we just get lucky with this person? But the point is, sometimes we aren't really looking in front of our face as to what is great. We're chasing something that either someone else told us to do. We're chasing something that we think is out there. And in many cases, the answer is right in front of you. But you have to look at it through a different lens. And so I like going through an exercise where we, kind of blindly write down a person that we just think exhibits all the traits or the beliefs, the values. And if we could have more of that, everyone write down why they're so amazing, and don't lead the witness. And then, well, are we really going after that? And sometimes you're 100% right. And sometimes you're going, you know what, we need to adjust what we think we're looking for, because we've gotten examples right in our own company. So that's the advice that I like to give. We can get pretty complicated with leadership behaviors and traits and assessments. But I think when you study the best, and many times the best is already sitting in your organization, you can get clarity faster than you think.
Absolutely. Sometimes our bench is where all of our answers are, right? Or right in front of us. And having a tool to do that, and there's tons out there. I know on this podcast, we've got a lot of predictive index followers. So, pulling out those management guides and really taking a look, or doing those job assessments and then calibrating that. And I love the exercise you just talked about, to do that first and then do the job assessment and say, all right, where are we at with these? And how do we get, so we're all in agreement to what this is? Otherwise, the person coming into the role is pulled in 8 different directions and feels like an octopus that gets disengaged and leaves.
Absolutely. We've all done that.
Right. And we've all been there too, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. And so what about for HR? For that, what's that actionable takeaway for HR?
Yeah. I think when I was in HR, it's the same advice that I would have today: is study what works and listen to the business. Yeah. I think one of the traps that HR can fall into is what the latest research says of what they're supposed to do. And I always used to say, if it doesn't work for the business, it doesn't work. And so you might have the best policy, procedure, test, you name it. But if it doesn't work for the business, it just doesn't work. And so there might be adjustments that we have to make to do that. But I would just continue to say, follow the business and make sure you get ahead of that with people. Sometimes that actually is about creating the demand. Mm-hmm. HR has a tendency sometimes to lead with supply, meaning here's what we should do. And the business doesn't have the demand yet. Mm-hmm. And so I used to always try to create the demand, which would sometimes mean we had to be fast followers. But again, going back to, do we really know the business, and how do we adjust over time and not just kind of shove HR, so to speak, and this is what you're supposed to do? It just typically doesn't work.
Right. Because you have to be in the ear and have the ear of your key leaders inside the organization, including your executives, because if you're not aligning to those business results, you're not serving the organization.
Yeah, you do that. And if you can pace with them, you can run pretty fast.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm curious, Ryan, where can our listeners find more out about you, about QPS? And all the things. Yeah.
I mean, I do a lot on LinkedIn and love to engage with lots of different folks. So you can get in touch with me through there, qpsemployment.com. I'm pretty easy to find. But as you can tell, I get pretty passionate about how we combine great business with great people. So it's become my passion. It's become my hobby. It's become my profession. Yeah, would love to further engage.
Awesome. And for a super fun treat. Our next episode, we're actually talking with your head of HR. And so be sure to join us as we get a different take. So again, we like to talk with the executives and then the HR folks inside of organizations. So we have those two takes on it within the business. So be sure to join us in our next episode for that. And we thank you for being with us today. Have a great day.
Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.